concept. We can identify these sort of wasteful streams and make more use of them, really. So turn them into some sort of a marketable product or something like that. So, I mean, I'm going to give the example from the UK, harvesting nutrients from a wastewater treatment plant effluent to make fertilizer to give to market gardeners so that they can grow some food. Do you see what I mean? So that it's this circular sort of concept. So, and we've got 4 urban living labs, one in Rotterdam, one that you know of in Sao Paulo, the one in Bristol, and then the water hub in the Western Cape in South Africa. And the issues that we've had are that they're all terribly different, all doing wonderful stuff, but it's difficult to find some sort of an umbrella to be able to sort of get them all together. But it does mean that we're learning all the time, all sorts of things from everybody. So it's been fantastic. It's been great. Yeah. So anyway, so I will now hand over to Esther.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Walter. Actually, Walter is not so far away, the project São Paulo ULL, because he's always involved with the main problems. So he's something like our consultant, for instance, for the indicators elaboration. So he is actually a part, and thank you very much. I would like to introduce Walter. Professor Walter Belik is full professor of economics at the University of Campinas in São Paulo, here in Brazil. He has a PhD and a MS in agriculture economics and a bachelor in business administration concerning developing studies on food and bioenergy. Professor Belik was visiting fellow at University College, also the University of California, Berkeley, and guest lecturer at University of Kassel, Germany. And he was a coordinator of the Center of Studies and Research on Food, the NEPA, at University of Campinas for 5 years. Professor Belik was one of the coordinators, and I think he was one of the creators of the Zero Hunger project in Brazil at the first time, a wide academic research that turned into public policy in Brazil from 2003. And he was member of National Council for Food Security and Nutrition. He coordinates the initiative Latin American Caribbean Without Hunger project based at FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, regional office in Santiago, Chile, during 2 years. And since 2013, Professor Belik is member of high-level panel of experts from the Committee on World Food Security. As voluntary, he is member of the Safe Food Brazil Council and Prato Cheio, that means something like full plate, Food Bank Council in São Paulo. As well as I remember, Walter, you are now from Zero Hunger branch, the FEL. I think it's a spin-off of the big policy initiative.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Esther. First of all, I would like to thank for this invitation. It's an honor to be here. I have to apologize for my English is not so top, is rusted, but I will try to communicate and show some things about food losses and waste This is the theme of my conference. And I would like to discuss some methodological problems in order to calculate this food losses and waste. So let's start from the beginning. Oh, okay. Oh. Can you see now? Okay. And I prepared some slides, but if you want to interrupt and ask some questions, no problem. We are in a small group. We have to talk. Okay, the first thing is to discuss what is going on with this population growth. As you know, from 2018, we had this new estimate from UN Population Division about the forecast for the population in the world. And they remake their estimates, their previsions, to say that we are going to reach in 2050 9.5 billion people. Formerly, we had another estimate that says that maybe the population is going to stabilize in 2050. But this new provision says that we are going to still grow until the end of the century. As you see in the right side of this graph, we see the line, the red line, dot line. You see the growth population in China, and you see that they expected that China is going to stop its growth, but still there, China is still growing, still increase their population until 2025, 2028. So we expect more population until the end of this century. Okay, as we have this 9.5 billion people, just this turned on our yellow light in order to say, okay, maybe we are not having enough food to feed all this population. And this is not just a feeling, but happened that the main publications, the main magazines, as The Economist, Washington Post, New York Times, started to become in panic about this 9 billion. For instance, in the New York Times, in one report, said, don't ask how to feed the 9 billion people. So it started a kind of new revision on Malthus' previews that we are not having enough food to feed all these people. But as you see here, the situation in Malthus during the Malthus time was completely different. We had in the early 19th century a different agriculture. Before the Industrial Revolution, we didn't have all these developments on chemification and mechanization. It was completely different, but they replaced the same panic situation to the food system. And this was one of the motives that include people from farm sides, agribusiness mainly, started to say that we should produce more and more and more. And but if you see all the demands upon this system,
Walter, you're frozen. Do you want to see if you can get your computer going? Maybe if you turn the video off, it will work better.
It seems to be completely black now, so I don't know if he even has his video on.
Well, let's wait and see if he can get back online.
Esther or Erica, is it maybe that you have power outage or something?
Yeah. I've sent a WhatsApp to Walter.
Okay. Should we stop the recording for a moment? Just pause it, or?
Can you hear me? Okay. Let me put the screen. Okay. So I was saying that not only we need to feed more people, and this is the provision of FAO. You see here in the left side, the provision of FAO that we should increase the supply of food in 60%. Not only this, but also there are some forecasts from the International Energy Agency saying that the demand is going to increase 50% by 2050. And water, we have also a problem because it's planet that the demand is going to increase 30% by 2050. And this all is in an environment that has this problem of climate change. So it's not business as usual that you have to just produce and go on, but we have some difficulties ahead that is going to make this more and more problematic. Let's see. Okay, this just depict this forecast for 2050. FAO is saying that food production will have to grow 60 to 70% by 2050. You know that the agribusiness sector in Brazil is saying that we should produce 100% more in order to supply the world with this food. And not only the quantity, the amount of food that we need to increase, but also the quality, the type of food is changing. So as the countries are becoming more wealth, they are consuming different types of products. So meat now is a kind of Western diet that most of these countries are adopted. So is expected to rise the meat consumption from 32 to 52 kilos capita year. If you divide 52 kilos in a year, you see that it's each person is going to consume 150 grams of meat every day. So it's a beef every day. It's very complicated in order to, if you take the problem of gas emissions in this situation. Also, the problem of bioenergy, because food is now disputing, is competing with fuel in terms of raw materials, and is expected that the bioenergy is going to grow 100% by 2050. There's a lot of countries that are substituting their fuels based on carbon to ethanol or electricity. So it's complicated. Climate change is a reality in most of our countries. And due to all these reasons, the prices of land are skyrocketing. We see in all countries, and in some countries, we have some shortage of water. Currently, we have this 36% of population living in urban areas without water supply, proper water supply. And we see that we have some commitments for 2030 in 9 years. It's not so much. First of all, Rio plus 20, Zero Hunger Challenge. Zero Hunger Challenge is saying that we are going to eradicate the hunger by 2030. It's quite complicated if we take in account that we have 832 million people in hunger all over the world. The COP21 that has some goals in order to do not let the temperature of the Earth increase more than 2 degrees by the end of the century. And lastly, the SDG. We have 17 SDGs. One of them is the 12.3 that's saying that we have to reduce in 50% the amount of food losses and waste by 2030. This is quite complicated. Let's have some information about people undernourished. Formerly, we had this estimate of 831 million people in hunger. That means a prevalence of undernourishment around 11%. But now, from this year, the FAO has reviewed their estimates, their previews, and we went down in terms of the number of undernourished people. Now the new estimate says that we have here 86 million people in hunger because these figures are not taking into account the number of undernourished people in China. China has reduced the number of undernourished people in 200 million people in 10 years. So they are now incorporating these new figures on undernourished. This is the last report of FAO, SOFI, State of Food Insecurity in the World 2020. In the right side, we see that these undernourished people are located, they are living in areas as Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Asia. Most of people are from Asia, the south of Asia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, Myanmar, other countries like that. So roughly 90% of these undernourished people are living in these areas of Africa and Asia. Okay, so how to feed these people? This is a big problem. We have here some curves about food production. I took production index from 1961. So we have a 60-year span analyzing what happened with food production. And As you see here, these two curves, one is agriculture and the other livestock, you see exactly that the production in terms of volume has increased 3 times, 3.5 times, considering agricultural livestock. If we take non-foods, the increase was about 2 times, but it's a lot. If we put these curves in a perspective, taking the population in terms of per capita, we will see that the curves are above the 100 here. So means that the production is increasing, is growing above these curves of population growth. The only thing is non-food that is down, is below the 100 line, but is not so worried about this because this is maybe some substitution from natural resources to artificial resources. This is not a big problem. The other thing is the yields. The yields in agriculture. If we take these three main cultures in the world, we have three different diets in the world, the wheat diet, the rice, and the maize diet. We see that the yield is not growing so fast. The yields are growing around 1% in wheat, 1% in rice, and 1% in maize. So this growth in terms of yield are very close to the growth of the population. We estimate that the growth of our population in the last 20 years are 1.05. So it's possible to do that, but we are not having this huge yield growth that we had during the Green Revolution, for instance. We have a different situation. So that is a reason, that is a point that take these people, the productivist people, to say that we need to improve our agriculture. We need to provoke a new green revolution. We need to look for new elements in order to increase these yields very, very fast. But after that, let me say some words about production. We see that now China is the main cereal supply in the world. We have the cereal supply, grain production in China has reached 600 million tons in the last year. So it's almost surpassing US. If we take these curves here, we see China in red, Brazil in blue, and US in green. We see China departed from a very low position and now is very high, is the main producer in terms of food, not only grains, but other things. We have Brazil here, the same, but all these countries are above the mean of world population, world food production. In China, we have also some problems considering the shift in diet. China is a very interesting country. They have 19% of world population and only 7% of world's arable land. Okay, we have a huge chemification in Chinese agriculture, but they are succeeding in produce more and more in terms that they could reduce their food deficit in terms of calories to only 50 calories capita day. This is a huge success in terms of Chinese agriculture. See another graph comparing China to Brazil. We see the poverty, taking the poverty line of World Bank of $1.9 a day capita. We see that in 1990, around 68% of Chinese population were below the poverty line, and went down and down and down. And now we have around 6 or 7% of Chinese population in poverty. The same movement we had in Brazil during the 90s, but now this movement is becoming flat, and I'm sure that under Bolsonaro government, the poverty went up and up again. This is just to show the composition of Chinese daily diet, to stress this situation of meat. You see here, this red area is meat, is pig meat. Pig is a symbol in China, a symbol of wealth. So the pig meat is growing fast in China and now represent around 20% of Chinese diet. So Chinese are changing also their diet, not only eating more, but eating different quality of products. In China, we can see exactly these problems of what we call seesaw effect. At the same time, when we have the prevalence of undernutrition going down, we have the prevalence of obesity going up. So we can see the last numbers here, the last year, the undernutrition in China was around 8%, and this is the same figure here of obesity. We have almost 8% of obesity in China, which is very complicated. It's not the same level of US that you have 38 or Brazil 26, but it's complicated, is a trend that we have to deal ahead. Well, this is the last graph on dietary situation, comparing different countries. I took here 3 dates, 92, 2002, 2014, and we see here all countries with more than 100 million people. We see that this is the pattern, the US pattern, 3,500 calories capita day, and countries are becoming close to this pattern, this line of 3,500. We see here even countries that were very close, they didn't have economic exchange with other countries, as Vietnam, as Myanmar, as Bangladesh, now are becoming opened and adopting the same Western diet pattern. And the Western diet pattern is not only regarding the food, it's regarding the whole process. It is a package. We have a type of consumption in supermarkets, packaging, big size portions, and all things that we can observe in our countries. It's a different type of food consumption, completely. Here you can see the Engels curve. I know that maybe everybody knows about the Engels curve, but it's a relationship between the food share of consumption and the income of these countries. And here we have in this line the per capita income of this country, GDP per capita. As you see, in poor countries, as Tanzania, for instance, we have 70% of the household budget is spending with food. On the other hand, in rich countries as Luxembourg or Japan, we see that they spend very low money in food, below 20 or US 9% of household budget is spending with food. So in this situation is a completely different perspective in terms of food. In poor countries, people are worried, are concerned about availability of food, disponibility of food. Just that. The second step is about safety. Okay, let's see if the food is safe in order of consume, if innocuous this food. The third step, quality food. And then quality in the supply chain. Let's see what is the relations in producer countries. Let's see the situation of labor in these countries. We are worried about this. Let's talk about sustainability. And the top step is about ethics. I'm worried about a lot of different things as gender, as inclusion, as a lot of different things. Okay, so let's go back to our discussion. So if the food would be not sufficient in order to feed the people, the first position says, okay, let's produce more. Let's do different things with food, more with less. So we need to disseminate these new technologies as biotechnology, nanotechnology, clones, GMOs. Let's do different things in order to supply more food. Also, we need to invest in technology. The intensification of land use. If you take some countries as Brazil, we have land use very, very low. So it's possible to intensify this land without deforestation. New areas with potential for farming, not only on land, but also in the sea, for instance. It's possible to produce more food from sea. And lastly, the food 2.0, the laboratory foods. So it's possible to feed people with artificial meat, artificial foods. It's possible to incorporate these new developments of science. The other position is actually is my position, is okay, we need to supply more food, but we have enough food. It's possible to use the food that we lose or waste in order to feed people. The estimates of FAO says that we lose or waste 30% of everything that is produced for human consumption. So if we could reduce 50% in this discard, we could solve 25% of this problem. So we don't need to produce so much. We could recycle, we could use this food, we could change our diets, we could do a lot of things, because food that is loose or waste is a tremendous problem. Because if you see that agriculture accounts with 14% of greenhouse gases, if we reduce 30%, it's possible to reduce also the emissions in some areas. It's interesting, I was discussing with a Brazilian friend and saying that if we take the gas emissions matrix of Brazil, we will see that the main source of emission is deforestation. 30% of gas emissions in Brazil come from deforestation. And agriculture contributes with 16% or 17%. So even though we improve our system in order to change things, for example, transportation. Transportation contributes with 14% in Brazilian matrix. If we reduce in half these emissions from transportation sector, this will not the same as curb the deforestation in Brazil. Deforestation contributes much more for gas emissions than transportation or even agriculture. Okay, if we put in a line these emissions in road, if the food losses and waste was a country, maybe it was the third country in a line in terms of greenhouse gases emissions. First, China, second, US, third, food losses and waste. And also consume water. The total amount of water is equivalent of all the water that runs in Volga River in a year. It's a lot of area that is wasted to produce for nothing, as 1 billion hectares, or 30% of arable land. And we see here that in terms of money, the cost of this food loss and waste is equivalent of $750 billion every day. Most of these conclusions are in this report that I participated in 2014. And we took some information. Most of the calculations were made by the SIC, the Swedish Institute of Biotechnology and Agriculture. So I will take some information from this report. Are you following? I'm talking.
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Okay. I thought that I was lost again.
Can you very briefly go back to the report? I'd like to see the link. Is that okay?
Okay.
Thank you. That's great. I took a screenshot. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, the first thing in order to discuss these methodological things is to separate two things. In one side, we have losses, and the other side, waste. Losses are unintentional. We didn't plan to have losses. Losses occurred in this initial phase of production, and is due some problems of production, planning, or changing in prices that makes these farmers to discard their production, for instance. The food waste is the opposite, is intentional. People throw out food. People discard food deliberately. I don't know how to say this word. And occurs in the links downstream in the value chain, occurs during the marketing or in households. People just throw away because bought supersized packages. They don't use all this food. They didn't like the food. We have expirations date. We have a lot of problems that happen in home, and people discard this food. What the problems that we have when we measure? First of all, we have to differentiate what is normal versus what is abnormal. We usually considered food when the food is ready to eat. Food that is in the field is not food. Food that was not harvested is not food. So if you lose your crop because there is a rain or something in the climate, maybe is normal, and you just lose your crop as usual, as happen usually. But it's possible to plan, and it's possible to prevent against plagues, against a lot of things, and this we have to take in account. The other problem is the data selection. How to take the data selection, how to compare different situations. The SIC study, in our study, took mostly the data of 2009. It's complicated because we don't know what happened in 2009 in terms of climate. What happened is possible to use the same data in different situations. It's a question that we have to be sure about that first before start to study. The other problem is the conversions, because we calculate food losses and waste according to their weight, but it is not possible to add in account pears and apples. So we have to convert everything into energy. And the tables, the conversion tables are complicated. Conversion tables, we don't have exactly this situation. The USDA has a good table, conversion table, but is not complete. It takes the situation of in US, but even the FAO use the same tables of USDA. The other problem is the quality, because sometimes a loss is considered as when the product lose quality. If you go to a street fair, you see that the price go down. The prices go down according to the time of this street fair. So there is a system that the quality of the product lose in terms of time. So it's not possible to consider it that as a loss, but just some changes in prices. And last but not least, this is the most important thing, is what is edible parts. What is parts that we can eat and not eat and throw away, just throw away, consider it as regular losses. Depends on culture, depends on preferences. Is quite complicated. For instance, in Brazil, we usually don't eat chicken feet because chicken feet is a kind of taboo in Brazil. But in China, they like very much chicken feet. They think that chicken feet are a delicacy. So how to consider that if the families just throw away the chicken feet when they buy chicken? So we have very big problems comparing different production systems, different food crops. When we use old literature, for instance, I was seeing the losses in the coffee production in Brazil. And most of the literature for coffee losses in Brazil are based on some studies that the English people, English scientists did in Africa. So it's not possible to compare coffee production in Brazil with Africa. It's completely different. And the problem of weight also. These are some graphs where we relate regions of the world with the link with the part of the value chain in terms of losses and waste. We see here clearly that countries in Europe, North America, and industrialized Asia, Japan, Korea, and China have waste a lot of food. In North America, 40% of food losses and waste are wasted in the households, in this part of consumption of food. On the other hand, we have the reverse situation in Latin America and other countries where the production and distribution are the big problems, is a trouble in our countries to distribute food because we don't have properly channels of distribution. So they lose 60% of food in production and distribution. Here is the South Asia, and this is Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. We see that they are poor, they don't discard food, they eat everything, but they lose a lot here in these early links of the value chain, downstream. I'm going to skip this because we don't have so much time. And here it's the same graph but distributed according to the link of value chain. So we see that the big losses and waste are here in agriculture, 32%, but we have post-harvest also with a big problem. We consider it post-harvest because the fruit is ripe and is considered food. So here we have 55% of our food losses and waste. And here, consumption. Considering the regions, we see that Europe and industrialized Asia are the main focus, the main sources of food losses and waste. Using the same estimates, but compared to the size of population, we see here in this line population, considering all the world population in 2014, that was 7.8 billion people. And here we see the food losses and waste per capita. So North America has 296 kilos capita year, but the size of population is not so large. But here we have South and Eastern Asia, India, for instance, a very large population, but the food losses and waste is about 1/3 of what happened in North America. If we take North America here, we see that we have almost 300 kilo capita year. If the year has 365 days, it's almost 1 kilo day person that is lost or waste in North America. It's huge. And here, just to exemplify what was the calculation on different chains. For instance, this is the wheat and rye value chain in Europe. We have all the information about what is produced and what is consumed. And if we analyze this graph, we will see that starting from the bottom, we see here that the disponibility of wheat and rye in Europe was around 200 million tons of rye and wheat. And we have some that came from imports, some that came from stocks, some that went out based on exportation. So this is the domestic supply. And this domestic supply is divided in feed, seed, processing in industry, and the waste, the direct waste. And this is the food available to eat, considering this whole chain. And from this food, something went to process, and something went to feed from food, something that was disposal and was available for feeding animals. And this is a resume of what was done in terms of calculations. Okay, I'm going to the end, saying that it's very important to reduce food losses and waste, and we have a lot of different ways to do that? First of all, is the most important is the prevention. So it's possible to prevent against food losses and waste. There are a lot of campaigns against food loss and waste, and it's possible to increase the awareness about food in terms of prevention. This is the main policy. And if we have some discards, it's possible to redistribute these foods. The food is not good for commercialize, but perhaps is good for consumption. Is ugly, for instance. Consumer don't want this kind of food, so it's possible to give or to redistribute this food through food banks, which is the main policy. After that, we have non-food. What remains from this process are not food. So it's possible to use to animal feeding, industrial recycling, renewable energy in biodigesters, for instance, compost, incineration, and the last step in this stair is disposal in landfills. So when it's not possible to do anything more, you just throw away into the landfills. It's interesting because there is a kind of story that says that if we could save food in rich countries, the poor people could eat more. But this is not true. This is just something that you say to the kids in order to have that they eat more, because it's not possible to transport food from one side to other side. The world is not a communicating vessel that you can do that. So you have different types of diets, you have different types of situation. So this cartoon here is not so good, but illustrate the situation. It's not possible to just use the food that is not edible, that is not used in rich countries into the poor countries. Okay, here some campaigns against food losses and waste, some important campaigns. You guys here, there in UK have this ROP, which is very important, is an example for the world, but we have other campaigns. These are actually a campaign from Waitrose, I think, in UK regarding to improve the consumption of ugly foods. It's interesting. This is an interesting recommendation to you that would like to see a good film, a good documentary. I recommend this documentary from Agnès Varda, Les Gleneurs et la Gleneuse, is about in the Middle Ages, what was the policy. This is the interesting picture of Millet, an impressionist, showing people taking profits from this land that was just harvest. That was a policy in the Middle Ages that let poor people to collect this spare grains or spare fruits in the landlord's property. And gleaners is also in English, is the name of interesting and very very good food bank in US. Okay, to conclude, what we can see exactly, we can see that first of all, there is not a good methodology in order to calculate exactly how much are the food losses and waste. We have to adapt our technology to all these problems that we have with databases and information from the fields. The second thing is that the collection of food wasted is the best alternative to use this food that is discarded in order to feed people, because this not interfere with the economic system. I go ahead and discuss more this point. The other thing is that it's possible to improve productivity gains, not using ultra use of pesticides or everything, but it's possible to approach these productivity gains considering the different regions of the world, using resistant varieties and other improvements of science in order to use. So what I'm saying is that the improvements of green revolution are not over. We can use more from their lessons. Fourth, the rural technical assistance is very important, and food technology and nutrition to consumers are very important in order to change our profile of diet in order to use more food that is lost and waste. And the last thing is this point, which I consider it very important, is the intervention of government. It's not possible to let just the private initiatives take the initiative to do that. We have to empower the government and public authorities in order to induce some changes, induce in terms of altering relative prices or taxation or reducing subsidies. There's a lot of things that is possible to do in order to reach what we want in terms of SDGs. For instance, in 9 years, we have to get there. Okay, that's all. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you so much, Walter. That was wonderful. And we can open this for questions. If people have questions, they can please unmute themselves and ask. And maybe I would like to start with actually something that came to my mind when you were talking about this picture and the movie of the poor people harvesting the sides of the fields. So, you know, I'm originally from Israel and I'm Jewish, and part of the Jewish Old Testimony, the Bible, one of the rules of the Jewish religion, those that, you know, are actually keeping the rules, is that it's a law in the Jewish religion to leave 7% of your crops in the sides of the fields for the poor. So that's kind of a requirement from the Old Testimony, which is actually kind of interesting. So when you showed that, it came to my mind. So that was an anecdote. Now I do have a question. One thing that really bothers me, and I see it quite a lot, maybe it's particularly prevalent in the US. For example, in my university, we have these coffee shops, cafeterias, they have sandwiches, they have packed salads. They keep them for a day, maybe 2 days. They, you know, keep in the refrigerator, they can sell a day old. After that, whatever they don't sell, they throw. And there's students that are poor, hungry, don't have a lot of income. And I sometimes ask them, why are you throwing these? This is perfectly good food. Why don't you give it to the students? I've got lots of students that would love to eat this day-old sandwiches. And their argument is for liability reasons, for health. They're not allowed to give this food away because then they will be in trouble because of health concerns or whatnot. I sometimes tell them, okay, put the sandwiches in a big plastic bag and put it next to the trash. And then I can email the students to go pick it up. But, you know, they can't really officially give this food for free. They prefer to throw it away than to give it. And I think that's something that is problematic, and I'm not sure how we can solve this issue.
Want me to answer now, or we go around?
No, go ahead and do it one at a time so you don't forget and give people time to.
No, but this is interesting. You raise a very interesting point, because some rules in some countries just forbade the donation of this prepared foods, just raw food or different things of food. But this is a good example of malpractice, provision of production. So who is paying more for the sandwiches are the regular consumer, because they are paying twice the sandwiches that are just thrown away. So it's possible maybe to the university to charge the cafeterias if they throw away. It's possible to, I don't know, to measure the garbage of them in order to see how much they are losing in terms of food. It's interesting, in US, in California, there's a movement called dumpsters divers. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, dumpster divers. Yeah. And there's so many homeless people here that really can use this food.
Because if the food is in the dumpster, it's possible to collect it. So people are just actually diving into the dumpster in order to get food. And it's interesting because even these good supermarket chains, as that one, how is called this?
Whole Foods.
Holy Foods. And there's another one, I can't remind.
Yeah, there's various.
There's another one, even Whole Foods is throwing away their food. So it's possible to charge this. Maybe the city hall could create a law. You see that in France, there's a lot of different laws in order to avoid this discard of food. It's possible to just charge them, and they will change their behavior.
So you're saying governance solutions, making laws that prevent that.
This cafeteria in university is a concession from the university. So you make the rules. You can change the rules and say that if you are discarding, you are out. Something like that.
Jana.
I actually wanted to, first of all, thank you very much, Walter, for a very interesting presentation and taking the time for talking to us. Thank you very much. In your conclusions, you put down the second bullet point, and you wrote, the collection of food waste is the best alternative to fight food waste losses in the short term, and is one that does not interfere in the economic system. So I have two questions on this. And I start with the bigger one first, which is the one, is it actually bad to interfere with the economic system, which I think currently is very much the cause of food waste? And there are challenges around food loss, etc., which you outlined partially. But isn't the current economic system really to a large extent the cause of the food waste, and shouldn't we therefore challenge it and actually interrupt the economic system to some extent, the agricultural production system, etc.? That's my maybe bigger question. The other one is the collection of food waste in the UK is actually happening quite a lot, that we have things like social supermarkets, etc., and real organizations which are collecting from major supermarkets sort of products which are close to the best before date, and then they are being redistributed for either free or for little money to people who cannot afford buying in the supermarket itself. And so this has advantages in terms of food not being wasted, but in terms of a sort of ethical question, it also seems a bit strange that we have this whole stream of food which we don't see fit for some people, but we see good enough for other people. And this also came up with what Adina was talking about. So from an ethical perspective, is this really the way to go from a social sort of justice perspective? Thanks, Walter.
Okay, let me say that you're right. Your first question, I was expecting this question, sure. Because it's interesting, because we have this big amount of food that is lost or wasted. And why happened that? Happened because there is a functionality in our system that absorb this deviation of sense. Is the same as the example of Adina gave. People are paying more for their sandwiches because this cafeteria is throwing away a lot of good food that could be consumed. But I actually use this argument because I work for a food bank in Brazil, and I use this argument in order to show to the business people that we don't want to interfere in their business with this. So if they are donating this food, will not change anything for them. It's better than just discard, and it's much better for them because if they don't do that, they have to hire someone to withdraw this food and discard this food in a landfill. So this could cost more for them if they don't donate this food. But you're right. What we want is to interfere in the economic system, but as a kind of argument that I have to use in order to convince people to donate food, I normally say that is not interfering. It's just a good Samaritan act that they are doing for them.
So it's very pragmatic, basically, that message you're sending out.
Yeah,
it's sort of looking at the immediate needs, and yeah.
That's right. You know that some countries have what we call a Samaritan Act that gives some how to say this reducement in tax payment if they donate this food. I don't know what happened in UK, but in US, we have this Good Samaritan Act that let people to rebate from expenses. This food is very good for them. In Brazil, we don't have Good Samaritan Act. So for them, it's the same if they donate or do not donate, if they just throw away. The second thing is what UK is doing is a benchmark, is very important for other countries. And they are rescuing a lot of food, and this is a saving for the system. But it's complicated, considering this situation, the current situation with this COVID-19. So many people are needing food. So many people are depending from these donations. So it's very complicated to elect who is going to receive this food. In poor countries, as Brazil, as other countries, if they announce that they are giving food, the lines will be huge. So they would prefer to donate through these food banks or through government. There's a lot of movements, government asking for food in order to donate to other people. This is quite complicated because it's a kind of bribery. The supermarkets give to a government officer in order to donate. It's not so fair, that situation. But you are right, it's complicated to decide who is going to receive and who is not able to receive.
Thank you very much.
Ulrich?
Ulrich.
You're muted.
I can't hear.
You're not muted, Ulrich. We can't hear you.
Your microphone.
Your microphone isn't working, I think.
If you write your question in the chat, we can read it
Hello,
out.
is it working now?
Oh, yes. Yes,
Oh,
I
no.
can hear you
Okay.
now. Yeah.
We've got problems here as well. Okay, so it had to. Thank you for the talk. I'm interested in one thing which always bothers me, and this is the waste which goes into feeding animals, and that's also one of the really big elephants in the room. Kind of in Europe, two-thirds of all the arable land is used to feed animals. One of the largest import, and that's always a topic Miguel Altieri once asked me, you know, all in Europe, you're all doing so much, but then why you buy so much food from Latin America, which is, in a volume space, it is really the feed for the animals. So when I looked at the report, it always says, edible things, and obviously some feed for animals like grass and other things are clearly not edible or straw, but there is edible feed for animals which is perfectly edible, but it's not classified as waste. And I was just wanting to know your opinion on that one, because I think that's the really big the big unknown in terms of volumes and numbers, talking about soybeans and other large proportions of production.
Well, actually, the big part of some crops has the destination to feed the animals. If we take, for instance, the soybeans in Brazil, 70% goes to feed the animals in Europe or feed the animals in China. And this is the main support to this diet that they are adopted, because the meat became cheap in the diets. You are guys in Europe. I'm an old guy. I remember during the 50s and 60s, it was impossible to eat a beef in England or other countries. And now it's very cheap. And most of this destination of crops in the south hemisphere goes to feed the crops. And this the other type of waste that you are mentioned is rare. We are not using anymore this from the households in order to feed the animals. Maybe we have some from meat packers or other processors who are using meat disposals in order to prepare these rations, these portions to feed pets. Not more than this, but the main feed to animals in the world are soybeans or corn that are perfectly able to feed people. So in Altieri has completely is a reason in that point. It's totally nonsense.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, he's very realistic, and the feed conversion rate is often 4 or 1 to 4. So you need 4 times as much as protein, for example, from soybeans to make a pig, and then you can eat the same. You know, it's a massive waste in that level, even if you reduce it a little bit. Sorry, I don't want to.
Yeah, no. If you take the chicken, for instance, chicken needs 42 days in order to become ready to slaughter. So you see that the amounts of corn that you give to this chicken, it's in terms of calorie, is the balance is unfair. You spend more corn in terms of calories to receive less calories inside the meat, the chicken meat. So this is completely nonsense, but it's a type of, it's due to the relative prices.
Yeah, it's also just the carbon footprint. I mean, the carbon footprint for eating meat is so much higher than for being a vegetarian, for example. But that's kind of the luxury of the Western world. It's considered, you know, that's something we like to eat and consume.
Yeah, right.
Okay, anybody has more questions? I see Sue's hand. Go ahead, Sue.
So you mentioned a percentage, I can't remember, of the amount of food that a household would throw away. I think it was something like 26%. How do you get people not to throw that food away? I'm thinking very close to home. My son, if he sees a sell-by date, regardless, he'll throw something out. And I do think that sometimes on some food that it's ridiculous to have a sell-by date. So how can you, I suppose that's down to the government, isn't it? I mean, my opinion is if it's not got anything green and hairy on it, you can eat it. But I'm afraid my son throws things like that away.
Yeah. Well, there are some research saying that the main responsible for this waste from households are the expiring dates that are stated by supermarkets. So these expired dates are so confused that the consumer don't know exactly what is healthy and what it's, and sometimes they think that food will be transformed from one day to another day. So it's a kind of fairy tale that during the night, the food is not ready to eat and you have to throw away, just throw away. So this expiring dates is a problem, and there are people trying to simplify the system in order to show to consumer what is better. For instance, in the US, we have the best day, expired day. It's so complicated. There's, and maybe if we should change this system, it's possible to evitate, to avoid this discard. The other thing is to incentivize people to compost, to use composting for organic products. So all the spills and bones, or I don't know, you can compost and use this in your garden to produce more food. So it's a kind of recycling. It's interesting because, for instance, Canada is very advanced in this subject, and they forbade the use of, how you call this, triturator, in the sink of the kitchen. How you this
food
device,
grinder, the grinder.
Food grinder. Because people are just throwing the food through the sink of a kitchen and pressuring the sewing system in these countries, and you have to recycle this water. It's not totally nonsense. So you are doing two crimes. First, throwing the food. Second, throwing through the sewing system. So there are some advances that you can incorporate in order to do this. But the most important is to improve the awareness. People are buying lots of food that are not using, supersized packages and things that are not possible to consume in a short term. So this sector is very important. And you see, I was talking about China. China is interesting because you had a few years ago hunger in China. But the Chinese culture is that you have to waste food. It's polite to waste food. It's polite to left people on your food on your plate. It's polite to offer big banquets with a lot of plates and plates and plates in order to show that you are rich, a rich guy. So this is a Chinese culture. You have to change this. It's interesting because in these buffets, these big buffets, you lose a lot of food. So it's possible to save food. In US, for instance, the food banks are making some agreements with this catering system in order to collect this food after some parties. So when you have a wedding, for instance, or a bar mitzvah, so a lot of food, a lot of food. You put in the invitation that the food that remains is going to be collected by the food bank, etc., etc., etc. It's better for the guests. The guests feel better to see all that food that is just wasted, just throw it away.
I find that one thing that is useful in that respect is to make it easier for people to do this. So for example, composting. I must admit for myself, I never used to compost. It's too big of a hassle and whatnot. But now the city is composting. So all I have to do is put all of my compostable waste in compostable bags that you can buy, and the city collects it and does the composting for everybody, and then you can go and get some compost for your garden. Now, this is a lot easier and convenient for the consumer than if they have to have a compost pile in their backyard and turn it around and buy worms and all of the procedure. So I think, to make things more efficient, if we can centralize these protocols, like you said, changing the labels from the distribution, doing city composting, and so on, I think that will go a long way.
Mhm. It's interesting because you know that some places, as Korea in some places in Seoul, they are changing the system of the garbage collecting system. There's no more these trucks that goes and collect the garbage. Each consumer, each dweller has to pick their own garbage and take this garbage to a station. And in this station, the garbage is going to be weighed. And there's a machine that print a receipt, and you have to pay according to the weight that you waste. So this is a kind of taxes that you are imposing to these people. If you lose or waste more, you pay more. And also the composite bags. So it's possible to separate the garbage, the trash, and address this trash to stations properly separated. It's interesting. It's a different mentality. You have to change everything in order to do that. Esther?
Hi, Walter. Thank you very much for your talk. I just wonder whether, have you considered who benefits from food waste in your analysis? We have something we've been looking at recently is the sort of the waste paradox, that setting up usage of food waste can actually encourage people to actually waste more food. That's one thing. The other aspect is that things like food banks, if they become the norm, we end up locking in this concept that poor people get food from food banks. And that might not actually be the way we really want to go. Sue's point about best before dates also comes to mind, that it's very much in the interest of supermarkets and supply chain for people to waste food because they sell more. So that's another element we've looked at, is the economics of trying to reduce food waste. We come up with this, this concept that if you go back up the supply chain, it's in lots of people's interests to maintain a larger and larger supply of food. I just wonder whether you've looked at the sort of the beneficiaries of food waste and to see what motivates them and where they might be actually applying lobbying pressure on governments to actually maintain regulations, or would they would certainly be there to prevent new regulations coming in. So it's an interesting sort of power question, in a sense, in the system to look at. Yeah.
So Ian, you are right. There is a lot of beneficiaries of this policy, of this situation. The first one are the agriculture sector that is producing more and more useless products that are entering the market, and the consumer are paying for that. The industry also has interested in that in the supermarkets, but maybe if we could reduce this losses in supermarket, the prices could go down if we have competition into this supermarket sector. But if you take, for instance, the UK, 3 supermarket chains control 70% of the market. So they combine it themselves, what they want to do. I'm sure that it would be very good for the society, for the whole society, if we could reduce food losses and waste. But the punctual interests are different, and they control the chain. So, and also I totally agree with you about the food banks. I think that it is a kind of emergency. We could not see this as a model of consumption. This is nonsense. We should reduce the food banks in order to prepare these beneficiaries, these people that receiving food, to produce their own food, maybe urban gardens, or maybe different kinds of policies that prepare them to produce their own food and process this food. Is possible to progress in terms of this system, not only just receiving more people. Right.
Not a question, just a very quick comment on what you just said, Walter, in response to Ian's question. It's really nice hearing you also thinking along the same lines as we do in our research center. We do actually a lot of research on exactly those issues, empowering sort of communities to grow their own food to the extent that is possible, but also looking into these food systems with surplus food and short-term benefits, but the danger of making them part of a system which becomes established and sort of seen as normal rather than an emergency response. So we are currently doing quite a lot of work on that as well, and it's will be interesting maybe to stay in touch via Esther as well, and maybe exchange on the experiences on this in Brazil as well. So thank you very much. I have to leave now because it's really late here in dinner time, and our 5-year-old is really hungry. So from my side.
Yeah, I think that if there's no more questions, let's thank Walter again, and we'll all keep in touch. And Walter, if you can send me your slides, I will post them on our webpage as well.
Sure.
Thank
Maybe
you.
I can send through the chat. No, I
No, just send it by email.
Yeah, by email. Okay.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, everybody, and have a good weekend.
And I've saved the
Thank
chat.
you, Walter. Yeah.
So if anybody wants to guess anything off that. Okay, bye.
Okay.
Bye, Walter.
See you.
Bye, everybody.